There's one thing on everyone's mind going into 2024, and that's the presidential election. A lot of candidates put their hats in the ring this year and announced that they were running. But the biggest elephant in the room, former President Donald Trump announcing his campaign plans despite losing to President Biden in 2020, as well as facing numerous indictments.
In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
Trump continues to dominate the polls despite his mounting legal entanglements. Some experts say that the Republican primary is a race for second place among everybody else. In the middle of all that is Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who positioned himself earlier in his career as a Trump ally.
You've been real supportive of Florida, so thank you.
We're very much involved with Lake Okeechobee. Okay, good job. Thanks.
DeSantis, who gained name recognition through the resistance of COVID-19 mandates, was largely seen as the future of the Republican Party post-Trump. But since announcing his campaign, he has become the subject of attacks from Trump, and his campaign has hit a few snags along the way.
Earlier this year, DeSantis was seen as an attractive candidate. There was that generational difference. He's in his mid-40s. He's younger than Donald Trump, has a young family, a rising star within the party, and someone who had quite a bit of influence in a state like Florida, which had been leaning red for some time, but he definitely solidified Florida turning red.
Are you glad to be in the free state of Florida? Do you wish the rest of the country was run like we run it here?
You saw a lot of conservatives, not only at the grassroots, but also at the establishment level here in Washington, who were looking at Florida as this centerpiece of the Republican Party and an example for other states. And DeSantis was very much seen as the leader of that. So I think there was a lot of hope that DeSantis could carry on that torch and signal a shift in the party going forward.
Problem with Ron DeSanctimonious is that he needs a personality transplant, and those are not yet available.
So Ron DeSanctimonious was, I think when we all heard that, we immediately got flashbacks to Lion Ted.
Lion Ted.
Breathe. Crooked Hillary.
And I took it away from Hillary. Now we call her Beautiful Hillary. She's a beautiful woman. We call her Beautiful Hillary.
Little Marco, all of that stuff going all the way back to 2015 and 2016. It's Trump's signature move. He labels an opponent or someone he feels threatened by this nickname, and it has worked for him in the past. He's able to label them, and that sort of gets caught in our collective psyche. Now, this was notable because for the longest time before that, for years, Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis were sort of like two peas in a pod. In fact, DeSantis was seen as little Trump or Trump Jr. in a way when it came to Florida. If you go back to 2018 when he was running for election for governor, there's that very well-known ad.
Ron loves playing with the kids.
Build the wall.
He reads stories.
Then Mr. Trump said, "You're fired." I love that part.
He's teaching Madison to talk.
Make America great again.
People say Ron's all Trump, but he is so much more.
Big league. So good.
In a way, trying to shape the next generation of Republicans in the mold of Trump. So that partnership between Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump ended with Ron DeSanctimonious.
He didn't even fire Dr. Fauci. He didn't fire Christopher Wray. He didn't clean up the swamp. He said he was going to drain it. He did not drain it. He said he was going to build the wall and have Mexico pay for it. We don't have the wall. He did say in 2016 he'd have the largest deportation program in history. He deported less than Barack Obama did when Barack Obama was president. So some of these policies he ran on in 2016, I was cheering him on then, but he didn't deliver it.
Look, the Republican primary electorate, although they like Ron DeSantis and they liked Ron DeSantis, they were still more comfortable with Donald Trump, and they thought Donald Trump was still the future of the party. In fact, if you look at the polls where Trump is leading, oftentimes these voters that are picking Trump will pick DeSantis as their second choice. So it's not like these primary voters ever disliked Ron DeSantis. It was just that they thought this was always Trump's race.
One of the biggest breakout contenders for the Republican nomination is American entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy. Once seen as an underdog, Ramaswamy has dominated headlines after the GOP debates. The entrepreneur has closely aligned himself with Trump, with the former president even declaring him the winner of the fourth GOP debate.
Talk about a roller coaster. Covering him in Milwaukee at the first debate, we thought this was going to be a DeSantis moment. Either DeSantis was going to have this breakout moment, or he was going to go head to head with someone and get attacked by other candidates. But it actually ended up being Vivek Ramaswamy being the biggest name to come out of that debate. He launched a number of bombastic attacks on various candidates on stage. That was the start of his feud with Nikki Haley, them going at it on stage. Vivek Ramaswamy very much trying to portray himself as Trump Jr. in a way, a younger version of Donald Trump who's willing to carry that populist flag going forward in attacking the Haley and the Chris Christies.
It is going to take a leader from the outside with fresh legs from the next generation to unite this country, not the broken politicians who are puppets of the puppet masters, but the actual people in this country.
This year, given the war between Ukraine and Russia and obviously the Israel-Hamas war, you saw an opening for him to do that. But the problem is he didn't offer a path forward. He just attacked the Nikki Haleys on stage and accused them of having George W. Bush or Dick Cheney foreign policy in an effort to appeal to that populist audience online. And that's what I think about Vivek Ramaswamy. He is very online. I don't think a lot of Iowa or New Hampshire primary voters watching these debates watches Vivek Ramaswamy and say, oh, now I'm going to consider him. I don't think he's really moving the needle with that crowd, but I think he does move the needle with people online.
The only person more fascist than the Biden regime now is Nikki Haley, who thinks the government should identify every one of those individuals with an ID. That is not freedom. That is fascism. And she should come nowhere near the levers of power, let alone the White House.
Nikki Haley has garnered attention recently by gaining some big name endorsements. We're talking about the likes of New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu and the Koch network-backed super PAC Americans for Prosperity. And now experts are wondering if she can maintain and capitalize on this momentum.
I think Nikki Haley's campaign is sort of the story of the tortoise and the hare. Slow and steady wins the race. She launched her campaign in February. She was the second candidate to get in after Trump in November. And she had a lot of momentum after she launched her campaign. She had a very good week. It was a seamless rollout. You had a lot of, folks in the political community praising her. Voters were interested. But after that, going into the spring and summer, things seemed to quiet down for Nikki Haley. You saw Ron DeSantis jump in. You saw Tim Scott jump in. But I think the first debate was her first major breakout moment. That was when she was able to show off her skills on the debate stage and go head to head with Ramaswamy. She's had a number of viral moments and memes of, the look on her face when he's criticizing her foreign policy. And she's had a number of clapbacks and one-liners against him that have been very popular with voters.
And she should come nowhere near the levers of power, let alone the White House.
And I love all the attention, fellas. Thank you for that.
So then I think after those debates, you started to see her rise in the polls. But you also saw a number of donors looking at her as the potential Trump alternative as Ron DeSantis was plateauing. So as she was rising in the polls, you started to see her get these endorsements like from Americans for Prosperity, the Koch network. An endorsement is one thing, but I think the resources that an endorsement brings is more important. She was able to launch a $10 million ad buy in Iowa and New Hampshire. She was not running ads as early as some of the other campaigns. So that, I think, played in her favor.
The race between Democrats and Republicans is on, but speculations remain if any more third-party candidates will enter the race. Independent RFK Jr. has been seen as a threat to both Biden and Trump, and moderate Democrat Senator Joe Manchin has announced he will not be seeking re-election for his seat. Now, the West Virginia senator is sparking a potential White House run as a third-party candidate or an alternative choice.
There has to be a movement from the middle. Do I have a burning desire to be president? No. Do I have a burning desire to save my nation and save our country and all of us? Absolutely. And I would do anything possible.
Looking at Joe Manchin, he's not a popular guy in Washington, particularly with Democrats, but also with Republicans. He always keeps Democrats on their toes with these votes, but usually ends up voting with his party. But he's much more conservative or moderate than the rest of his party. But whenever I go outside of Washington and talk to voters, sure, there's voters that don't like him, but I think he has more of a positive impact as someone who's standing up to the Washington establishment. That's my experience outside of Washington. So if I'm a group like No Labels or a group that's trying to recruit a third party candidate, looking at someone like Joe Manchin, who is very much middle of the road in many ways, a Democrat from a very conservative state, he seems like a very ideal candidate. The problem is, though, you have Republicans and Democrats looking at these third-party candidates, and we have to talk about Robert F. Kennedy Jr., too, and they say all of these guys are going to be spoilers. And it's, I think we normally talk about third-party candidates and how they impact Democrats. And I think Joe Manchin has the ability or could potentially take votes away from Biden. But Robert F. Kennedy, he could take votes away from Trump. It's amazing to see how big his umbrella of support has grown. You can go to a Robert F. Kennedy rally and talk to someone who voted for Clinton in 2016 or someone who voted for Trump in 2016. He has this plethora of support. About the moment, it says that voters are so uncomfortable and fatigued with the two choices they're being presented, Trump versus Biden. With someone like Kennedy, I think, has done a good job of speaking to the collective moment we live in, whether it comes to the two-party system, COVID restrictions. He's tapping into a frustration that voters from both sides of the aisle and the middle feel about the political process and Washington itself. It also helps, or it doesn't hurt him that his last name is Kennedy. So he's able to pull higher maybe than a Marianne Williamson.
Things could not be more up in the air with the 2024 presidential election as we ring in the new year. Former President Trump faces multiple indictments, and questions still circulate about President Biden's fitness to run for office given his age. A dysfunctional Republican caucus continues to hold up legislation in Congress, potentially impacting the party's electability. And then, rising unrest in the Middle East has also put new pressure on the Democratic Party as it has shown its divide between the far left and more moderate Democrats. One thing is for sure, the 2024 election will be a wild ride.